If you're a Destiny fanatic like me, then you may be interested in tackling some of the Witch Queen's best content, the new 6-player raid called Vow of the Disciple. Of course, taking on one of the looter shooter's greatest challenges is no easy task, so we've put together a quick guide on how to earn that sweet, sweet raid loot. The Vow of the Disciple raid begins with a pretty straightforward activity that has no fail state. After killing a reflection of Savathun and entering the Disciple's bog, you'll want to ride your Sparrow to a black alien boat and stand within its orange aura. Begin killing things until Scorn abominations called Knowledge Bearers spawn. Once killed, collectibles will appear and must be collected and brought back to the boat. You can carry up to 3 at one time, and will need to move quickly as every few seconds outside the boat's aura will earn you a stack of Pervading Darkness, which makes you go blind and kills you after 10 stacks. After filling up the boat with enough knowledge, it'll start moving, and your team will want to ride atop it to the next location, where you'll need to repeat the process again. After repeating the process 6 times in 6 different areas, the boat will arrive at the pyramid where the proper raid takes place, and end the encounter. You won't earn any loot just yet, but you're past the raid's first major hurdle. Before we get any further into the raid, it's time you learn about the staggering 27 symbols you'll need to know in order to complete most of the upcoming encounters. Luckily, Bungie gave each of these symbols a name, and you can study them for yourself here. The first time you'll see these symbols will happen right as you enter the Disciples' Pyramid, when 3 will randomly appear in the first room you enter. These symbols are actually part of an optional scavenger hunt that takes place throughout the raid. By accessing secret rooms and shooting a panel with each of the 3 corresponding symbols your fire team got, you'll get a second chest after the raid's final encounter. The key is making sure that you don't leave any symbols active except for the 3 you were assigned at the raid's start, so remember to shoot the panel and turn it off if you find the wrong one. This is not by any means a requirement to complete the raid though, and we won't be listing all of the symbol locations here, so feel free to skip it. But if you want to hunt for them on your own, it's an easy way to gain some extra loot. And with that, we're now in Vow of the Disciple's first full raid encounter, called Acquisition. The encounter takes place in a giant museum area with 3 obelisks at different points of the room. The goal of the encounter is to defend all 3 obelisks from attack, complete a ritual to discover a code that must be entered on one of the obelisks, then enter that code by shooting the correct symbols on the obelisk. To claim victory, you'll need to repeat the process 3 times in the same run. Surrounding the obelisks in every direction, you'll find 9 rooms with symbols above them. Before starting the encounter, I recommend taking a walking tour with your fire team to make sure everyone knows where all the rooms are and has agreed on what to call each of them. Once the team is familiar with the rooms, break into 3 groups of 2 and have each pair assigned to 1 obelisk. It's also a good idea to assign a defender and a runner for each pairing. The defender will stay next to the obelisk and make sure no enemies are allowed to shoot at it, while the runner will move about and run errands as needed to complete the ritual. In front of each obelisk, you'll find a pillar that will begin to display symbols once the encounter begins. Think of the pillars as instruction manuals for the steps you'll need to take to complete the encounter. You have to be standing near them to see the symbols they show, and each pillar will fill up with its own unique symbols one at a time, meaning you might not see any symbols right away after the encounter starts, and have to wait for other pairs to get started on their own rituals before yours begins to populate. The first symbol that shows up on the top of each pillar will either be an image of the Traveler, a white orb, or the Pyramid, a black triangle. Similarly, looking to the center of the room, you'll see a massive bone mounted on top of a structure with one side labeled with the Traveler and the other side labeled with the Pyramid. The purpose of the first symbol you see on each pillar is telling you which side of the map you'll want to hunt for a Taken Knight called the Disciples' Compass. Communicate with your team to call out which side of the map the compass might be hiding on, then find and kill it as quickly as possible, with different teams taking responsibility for killing the compass if it's on the side they're defending, preferably with the runner handling the task if they're available. Once the compass has been killed, the pillar will show its second symbol. The purpose of the second symbol is to tell you which room you must enter to complete the next part of the ritual. So if you see the reflection symbol, whichever team is nearest to that door should send their runner inside. Some doors might be closed though, in which case you'll need to look to the center of the room and shoot a black diamond which shifts all doors in the room to the opposite state they're currently in. So, all open doors will close, and all closed doors will open. If your door is closed, shoot it yourself or ask one of the other players to do it quickly if you don't have line of sight. Once your teammate is inside the correct room, 2 scorned glyph keepers will spawn, one near a darkness symbol and one near a light symbol. This is where the third symbol on your pillar comes into play. The purpose of the third symbol is to tell you which glyph keeper must be killed in the corresponding room. Have the defender in front of the matching pillar read out the final symbol for the runner, and tell them if they see darkness or light. It will only ever be one of those two. Armed with that knowledge, the runner should kill the correct glyph keeper and look for a symbol to spawn near where that glyph keeper was standing. They should tell everyone in the fire team which symbol they see and remember it well. You'll be needing it later. As the first pillar fills with symbols and one pair completes their part of the ritual, the other 2 groups will begin to see their symbols as well, and each action must be taken before they'll see their next one. Repeating the process from the first pillar, the team must kill the compass using the symbol number 1, enter the correct room determined by symbol number 2, then kill the glyph keeper according to symbol number 3. Afterwards, the runner needs to remember which symbol spawned on their dead glyph keeper. Once all 3 groups have completed all 3 of their pillar phases, the final part of the ritual will begin, which requires the right symbols to be shot on a single obelisk within a very tight time frame. To do this, runners should communicate with one another and begin scanning the 3 obelisks to determine which of the 3 contains all of the symbols they've revealed after killing the 3 glyph keepers. You'll only ever find all 3 symbols on one of the 3 obelisks. After identifying the obelisk with all 3 of the glyph keeper symbols, the runner should make their way to the correct obelisk and shoot all 3. To pull this off, you'll need to do so within just a few seconds, meaning you should have each runner shoot their own symbol and count down before doing so. Trying to have one person shoot all 3, or not shooting them all at the same time, means you might fail to complete the ritual and lose the encounter. After shooting all 3 symbols on one obelisk, you'll see a notification saying that your offering has been accepted, and you'll earn yourself a moment of quiet before the ritual starts again. To beat the encounter, you'll need to complete this ritual 3 times. If you're wondering what the defenders are doing this whole encounter, they have the vital role of keeping enemies off of their assigned obelisk. If they let the enemy shoot the obelisk, it will quickly fill up with yellow light before causing an explosion that kills your whole team and makes you start over. They should also help with callouts or killing the compass if their runner is busy doing something else. And crucially, they should be equipped to deal with the unstoppable abominations that spawn near each obelisk and can ruin your day unless you take care of them quickly. After completing Acquisition, you'll run through some more creepy museum hallways and quickly find yourself in a giant room with 4 floors. You'll also see a freaky-looking hooded abomination called the Caretaker, doing some funky monster magic in the center of the room. We're going to need to kill him to complete the encounter, preferably emoting on his wretched corpse once the deed is done. Here's how you do it. Once again, this encounter will require your fire team to break into 3 groups of 2. If the team worked well during the last encounter, consider sticking with the same pairings to keep things running smooth. The first duo is by far the most complicated and important. The runners. On each floor, the runners will need to enter a dark hallway filled with wizards and shadow thrall, collect up to 3 symbols, then run out and work with their partner to shoot all the symbols they collected on an obelisk found near the door. Spending time in the dark rooms that contain the symbols will give the runners stacks of pervading darkness, which causes blindness and eventually death. So the runners should take turns going inside and aim to spend as little time collecting symbols as possible. It's best if you can find 3 symbols on a single run, but if you're having trouble, you should leave early and cut your losses instead of risking death. As they collect symbols, the runners should call out the 3 they're collecting as they do so. Waiting outside the room, the second runner can help kill ads and locate all 3 symbols in the obelisk ahead of their partner's return, so they know which panels they'll need to shoot. Once the first runner has collected their symbols, the second runner will need to shoot a door-opening diamond, similar to the last encounter, to let their partner out of the darkness. Or they'll be trapped inside and die. Once back outside, a prompt will tell you the obelisk is ready for your offering, at which point the runners should work together to quickly locate and shoot all the symbols the runner called out. Then they should switch positions and repeat the process until all 9 symbols have been collected and shot on the obelisk. The second duo is far simpler, but still a lot of fun: the stunners. The job of the stunners is to stand on either side of the caretaker himself, one in the front and one behind, and work together to stun him over and over again, delaying his inevitable approach toward the obelisk on that floor. Whoever is standing in front of the caretaker should move in and goad him to get angry and slam his fists on the ground. Once he does, his face will glow orange and the stunner on that side should shoot him in the face. Doing so will open up a vulnerable glowing orange spot on the caretaker's backside, near the top of his backpack. The rear stunner should quickly shoot this glowing spot. Doing so will cause the caretaker to be stunned for several seconds, earning valuable time for the runners to finish their ritual with the obelisk. Throughout the encounter, the caretaker will release a salvo of weird black creatures from his back, which fly around and ultimately try to crash into players and kill them. The stunners should do their best to shoot them out of the sky, especially while the caretaker is stunned and they have some free time. The stunners need to repeatedly stun the boss over and over again, until the runners are done with their ritual, at which time a damage phase will be initiated. If they fail and allow the caretaker to make his way to the obelisk before the ritual is complete, he will perform a ritual of his own and kill the entire team. Finally, the last pair of guardians will be on ad clearing duty. Put one on each side of the map and make sure they kill all the enemies that spawn as quickly as possible. Just as with the last encounter, the Scorn will try to shoot the obelisk, filling it up with murder juice until it explodes and kills the whole team. This is certainly the most straightforward role in this encounter, but vital, especially since ads can make life very hard on both the runners and the stunners if they aren't promptly killed. Once the runner's ritual has been completed, the boss will meander on over to the obelisk and the damage phase will begin. A small plate near the obelisk will begin to glow orange, corresponding with the side nearest to the path the caretaker took to reach the obelisk, and your team can stand inside it to deal damage to the boss. Rocket launchers and linear fusion rifles work wonders here, as does the exotic beam rifle Divinity. As you do damage, you want to be aware of the black flying worms that continuously spawn on the caretaker and target your team. A well-placed Warlock healing well or overshield-powered rally barricade could be very helpful in keeping the team alive. After a few seconds, the first plate will stop glowing, and you'll need to move to a new one a short distance away to continue dealing damage. A third plate will be a few feet away from that for the final chance to deal damage during that phase. After the boss has been damaged, he'll teleport to the floor above you, and the staircases will reveal themselves leading up to the next part of the encounter. The next 2 floors require an identical process as the first, with the only change being a different layout from the previous floor and a more complicated room to navigate for the runners. Aside from that, you'll simply want to repeat the ritual while stunning the boss and clearing ads until the next phase is triggered. Finally, the boss will teleport to a 4th, final floor where a last stand damage phase will immediately begin. Standing in a series of 3 plates as they light up will give you the final seconds you need to melt the boss and clear the encounter. With the caretaker dead, you can claim your hard-earned loot and breathe a sigh of relief, at least for the moment. As with most Destiny raids, Vow of the Disciple features a jumping puzzle, and after defeating the caretaker, you'll find yourself right in the thick of it. This part of the raid doesn't require much of an explanation, except to say you'll need to work together to progress through a series of moving platforms. There's also another secret chest to discover for those who explore off the beaten path. With the jumping puzzle in the rear view, you'll arrive at Vow of Disciple's penultimate encounter, Exhibition. This encounter is pretty straightforward to explain, but difficult to execute as it requires lots of communication and every player has to be firing on all cylinders to pull it off. The challenge starts in a room with a single relic, the Darkness Laser, a beam-firing relic that can be used to kill shielded Taken Knights protected by otherwise invulnerable shielding. Have one player use the Darkness Laser to kill the Taken Knight in the middle of the room, while everyone else kills the Scorn and Taken Glyph Keepers on the left and right. The person holding the relic will be able to read the Taken Glyph Keeper symbols, while those not holding the relic will be able to read the Scorn Glyph Keepers. You're looking for the one symbol both Glyph Keepers have in common, Once you've determined which symbol appears twice, shoot the corresponding symbol next to the door at the front of the room, and it will open. Deposit the relic, and a second one will appear, this time the Templar shield from the Vault of Glass raid. Whoever held the relic in the previous room will be on a cooldown, so 2 new people will need to step up and grab both relics to open the door and proceed to Room 2. Room 2 is similar to the first in that your goal is to kill 2 different types of Glyph Keepers, Taken and Scorn, and find the common symbol between them. Only those currently holding any of the activity's relics will be able to see the symbols dropped by the Taken Glyph Keeper, while those not holding a relic can see the Scorn symbols. While all this is happening, you'll be battling through a room while a timer counts down to your fire team failing the encounter. To extend that timer, the person holding the Darkness Beam will need to find and eliminate more shielded Taken Knights. Meanwhile, the player holding the Templar shield will need to run around cleansing their teammates as they steadily gain stacks of pervading darkness. Everyone else just needs to kill enemies, help call out Glyph Keeper symbols, and try to stay in groups to make it easy for the person holding the Templar shield to cleanse the team. The second room has 2 types of each Glyph Keeper, so now you'll need to remember 2 symbols in common that need to be entered in the massive door at the end of the area. Once you get through, deposit the relics and you'll see the third and final relic appear, the Eye of Riven. Going into the third room, you'll once again need to swap players holding the relics, as the previous users will still be on a cooldown. In addition to the Darkness Beam and the Templar Shield, the next room will also require one player grab the Eye of Riven and use it to destroy Taken Orbs, which make enemies in the area immune to damage, and crucially, make it impossible to kill certain Glyph Keepers. The trick to running the Eye of Riven is in knowing that whichever side of the room the first orb spawns on will mean that the next one is on the opposite side of the room. So just like the Templar Shield holder, the Eye of Riven holder will need to go back and forth between both sides of the room and help each of the teams as they kill their side's Glyph Keepers, and make callouts. As they call out symbols and let the Templar Shield holder know that they need a cleanse, they should also let the Eye of Riven holder know when they encounter a Taken Orb that's shielding their enemies and making progress impossible. As with the second room, the team will need to split up to kill Glyph Keepers and find 2 sets of common symbols to get through the door while all the relic holders do their respective jobs. Once through the third room, all 3 will need to deposit the relics and switch them to the other players before preparing for the fourth and final room. Luckily, if you've mastered the third room, you should do just fine with the fourth, as it doesn't add any new relics. The only difference from the third room is a different layout that admittedly has more ledges to fall off of. Repeat the process from the third room, killing Glyph Keepers and entering the correct 2 symbols into the door at the end of the room. Then deposit all 3 relics to achieve victory. This is it, Guardian. You've made it to the Vow of the Disciples' final encounter, and are about to face one of the coolest enemies in Destiny to date. Luckily for you, if you've made it this far, you already know most of the mechanics you'll need to stuff a sock in Rhulk's dumb face and claim victory. When you start the encounter, Rhulk will do a dope dance and threaten your life before deploying a giant orange shield. The first thing you should know about this encounter is that being inside or running towards that shield without the proper buffs will send you flying in the other direction, possibly at lethal speeds if you aren't careful, so keep your distance for now. The next thing you'll notice after he summons his giant orange shield is the floating shard above his head. Have someone shoot it to gain a special buff called Leeching Force, and preventing the fire team from dying of the pervading darkness they'll accrue the longer the shard remains in the sky. Leeching Force is a buff that allows players to absorb Rhulk's laser beam attack instead of getting killed by it, and gain a different buff called Emanating Force. But don't do this right away. Instead, whoever destroys the shard and gains Leeching Force should stand on a plate near the start of the encounter with the gift symbol on it, which will spawn 2 smaller shards behind the boss. Have 2 players destroy those to give them both Leeching Force, taking it away from the original player who was carrying it. This mechanic allows you to multiply the number of players who have Leeching Force, which is necessary to beat the encounter. If at any point no one on your team has Leeching Force, Rhulk will spawn another giant shard that needs to be destroyed, and if that happens 3 times, everyone will die. So it's a good idea to work together and switch off which players are carrying Leeching Force, to ensure that there's always at least one person carrying the buff. Once multiple players have Leeching Force, have two of them allow themselves to get hit by Rhulk's Kamehameha Blast to gain Emanating Force. Just make sure a third player has Leeching Force first, so they can hold on to it for the group and give it to the other players when they need it. Emanating Force will allow players to move freely within Rhulk's orange shield, and also will allow them to deposit their Emanating Force into the 6 pillars in front of them. But first, you'll need to know which 2 pillars to dunk Emanating Force into, and like lots of encounters in Vow of the Disciple, this means killing Glyph Keepers and reading symbols. Per usual, 2 Glyph Keepers will show up, and once killed, will spawn 3 symbols on their side of the map. Only certain players will be able to see each Glyph Keeper's symbols, so you'll need to work together to figure out which symbol appears in both dropped sets. Once that's been identified, a player not buffed by Leeching or Emanating Force will need to call out which of the 6 pillars display that symbol, and tell the Emanating Force players which pillars to deposit their effects into. Keep in mind that both the Leeching Force carrier and any Emanating Force carriers are on a timer before their effects go away, so you'll want to keep communication tight and move quickly. Once the Emanating Force effects have been dunked into the correct pillars, Rhulk's shield will shrink, and you'll need to quickly have the Leeching Force carrier multiply their effects to give it to 2 other players. Make sure that 3 players are carrying the effect before repeating the process. After 6 deposits, the shield will go away entirely, and Rhulk will flee to a small arena up a flight of stairs. Follow him to initiate damage phase. At the top of the stairs, you'll find Rhulk ready to go toe-to-toe with you, so be aware that he will absolutely kill you if you don't pay attention to his movements and keep your distance. He'll be immune at the start, so our goal will be to peel off his impenetrable armor before we get a chance to deal some serious damage. Whenever Rhulk dashes forward, he'll leave his glaive in the ground. One player should shoot it to gain Leeching Force, which will spawn a symbol that only non-buffed players can see. Match that symbol with one of the 4 pillars surrounding the arena, and tell the buffed player which one they should deposit it into. First, that player will need to allow themselves to get hit by Rhulk's laser beam attack to turn their Leeching Force into Emanating Force, then deposit it into the pillar that's been called out. Doing so will create a glowing weak point on Rhulk's armor, which the whole team should shoot to break. Repeat the process 4 times to destroy his armor completely and begin the damage phase. During the damage phase, Rhulk continues to fire his laser beam and dash at players, so keep on moving and use high-velocity weapons to deal damage, like linear fusion rifles. Stay away from rockets as their missiles travel too slowly to be effective against this fast-moving opponent. Unless you're doing some serious damage, you won't finish Rhulk off in one damage phase, so you'll need to run back down to the previous section and repeat the ritual with the Glyph Keepers to start another damage phase. But the process remains unchanged. After doing enough damage to Rhulk, he'll enter a final DPS check that wipes the team if you don't kill him in time, so save some heavy ammo and high DPS supers for the final chunk of his health bar. Concentrate your fire, and you'll kill him and claim sweet, sweet victory. And there you have it. You've beaten Vow of the Disciple and hopefully gained some awesome Darkness-themed loot in the process. Congratulations! For more on Bungie's beloved looter shooter, check out our review of Destiny 2: The Witch Queen. And for everything else, stick with IGN.